Hello, everyone. My name is Hector Zavala. I'm the Associate Director of the office in Boston of the National Autonomous University of Mexico. On behalf of our director, Javier Laguna, I would like to welcome you all to this new edition of our series of webinars in the humanities. Today, we will talk about the intersection of policy and personal choice, abortion rights in Mexico, USA, and France. And as usual, it's going to be conducted by our colleague, Mariana Imaz. Today, we will have three amazing guests, Marta Lamas, Shoshanna Ehrlich, and Magali Mazuy. And I'm pretty sure we all are going to learn a lot from three of them. Well, without further ado, I would like to pass the floor to my colleague, Mariana, so she can make the introductions and start the seminar. Thank you all for watching our series, and I wish you all a very nice day.
So good afternoon or good morning, depending on when you are joining us from, and welcome to this series of conversations about topics in the humanities that we're developing from UNAM Boston. So today we'll be talking with three scholars about an important topic that has occupied a central stage in many of our countries, and that is the topic of the legislation on abortion. Our aim today is to try to address how this issue has been incorporated or banned from public policies in the US, Mexico, and France. To discuss this, I would like to welcome our fantastic panel for today, Marta Lamas, Shoshanna Ehrlich, and Magali Mazuy. So before we start, let me introduce with a little bit more detail our invited speakers for today. Marta Lamas is a Mexican anthropologist, activist, and journalist, and is a professor and researcher at the National Autonomous University of Mexico. She's one of Mexico's most prominent feminist figures and has written many books and articles with the purpose of reducing discrimination by opening public discourse on feminism, gender, prostitution, and abortion. In 1990, Marta founded and edited one of the most important feminist magazines in Latin America, Debate Feminista. If that is not enough, in 2005, she was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Marta, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you, Mariana.
Shoshanna Ehrlich is a professor in the Women's and Gender Studies Department at the University of Massachusetts, Boston. Her work has a long-standing interest in the legal regulation of reproduction and sexuality. In 2019, she co-authored the book Abortion Regret, The New Attack on Reproductive Freedom, which focuses on how anti-abortion movement has deployed the abortion is bad for women trope to argue for an increasing restriction on abortion access. Some of her recent articles also address the abortion rights of undocumented teens in federal immigration custody, the comparative decisional rights of teens in the context of abortion and marriage, and the analysis of the recent US Supreme Court decision on abortion. Shoshanna, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you so much.
Magali Mazuy is a researcher at the National Institute of Demographic Studies in France. Her research is dedicated to advancing understandings in the field of fertility, childlessness, infertility, abortion, and gender-based violence. She's part of various research teams focusing on critical aspects of sexual and reproductive health and rights. Magali's research extends to the demographic landscape, examining abortion statistics on the broader demographic situation affecting reproductive choices. One of her aims is to produce impactful insight that informs policies and practices, ultimately striving for equitable reproductive rights and health outcomes worldwide. Magali, thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thank you so much too.
So, well, I want to thank you all for accepting this invitation and taking the time to discuss this really relevant and contemporary topic with us. We're truly honored to have you as our panel for today. So let me start this conversation by asking the following question. So what recent laws, court rulings have affected access to abortion in each of your countries? If we can sort of start discussing this issue there. So Shoshanna, please, if you want to take it away.
Sure. So it's kind of, I'm not sure if this was planned or just some remarkable coincidence, but today's the actual 2-year anniversary of the Supreme Court decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization. And although abortion rights, and I'll talk a little bit about this at some point, have been chipped away in the US since since Roe, nonetheless, there was what wasn't destroyed by sort of the gradual chipping away was the fact that there still was a federally protected right under the US Constitution, which is the supreme law of the land, to an abortion up until viability. So that at a minimum, even though particularly like in the South and in the Midwest, with a very disparate impact on vulnerable communities, there still was this fundamental constitutional right to abortion. States couldn't ban abortion. And with what happened in a nutshell in Dobbs on June 24th, 2022, is that the US Supreme Court said that Roe and a secondary case, Casey versus Planned Parenthood, that was 1992, they were just kind of made up by the US Supreme Court, essentially. And the Supreme Court overturned 50 years of precedent and overruled both those decisions and said that there's no federally protected right to abortion in the US, and it returned the matter of abortion to the states. And so each of the 50 states now has almost exclusive regulatory power over abortion. And I believe we'll talk more about how states are different in their approaches, or regions in countries. So I'll hold off on talking about that. One more point on the sort of this tension. So we're still waiting, and it'll be this week, for the Supreme Court to decide, and most predictions are not optimistic, about one more abortion case, which has to do with at a minimum requiring states to provide stabilizing care to folks who show up at emergency rooms with basically health endangering abortions. And states like Texas and Idaho are saying, no, we don't have any obligation. We ban abortion. You feds can't tell us what to do. So that decision, and it's EMTALA for those of you, by the time you hear this, the court may have decided it. So that's still a piece of a major decision that's yet to come. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Shoshanna. Marta, please welcome. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mariana. Well, in Mexico, it was the first time in 1871 that abortion was inserted in the penal code. And then in 1931, it was made a reform that allowed a woman, if she had been raped, to have an abortion. And from 1931 till 2007, there were 76 years where feminist groups and different people fighted for abortion to be considered as a health issue and not as a crime. And finally, in 2007, for Mexico City only, the law was reformed. And then from 2007 till 2019, we had 12 years where the fight to change the law around abortion changed in some of the states. We began with Oaxaca, and then from 2019 till now, till last year, we have 11 of the 32 states in Mexico City that have reformed the law protecting the interruption, the legal interruption of gestation, of a pregnancy in the public hospitals. It's free without any cause. I mean, simply because it's the woman's wish to terminate that pregnancy. And after those 12 weeks, there are some grounds in which a woman can have an abortion. genetical grounds, if her life is in risk, other things. But before those 12 weeks, it's free. Now in Mexico City and 11 other states. And this has changed very much. 3 years ago, the Supreme Court made a very important resolution stating 3 things. First, that no woman has to be criminalized because she has had an abortion. Second, that there is not a possibility that the state says when life begins, because there is a very complicating dispute around the moment of the starting of life. So there's no use of the state saying this is a moment where the life begins. This was used by many conservative legislators to say that from the moment of conception, there was a person there, so there was the prohibition of abortion. And the third thing that the Supreme Court said was to accept that the personal conscientious objection of a doctor, of a nurse to perform of abortion is legal, but it's only individually. The public institutions in Mexico have the right to perform safe and legal abortions to women in Mexico City and in 11 states of the Republic. And this has to also has a link to the change in the government. I mean, since the new government, and now with the second election that we recently have, a feminist woman elected, it's very probable that the law is going to change in the 20 states that still have a prohibition about abortion. The only ground or the only circumstance in which abortion is legal in all the territory is if it's to save the life of the woman or if it's because she was pregnant because of a rape. But only in 12, the possibility of saying a woman, I don't want to continue this pregnancy, is a legal right. That's more or less the situation now in Mexico.
Thank you so much, Marta. Magali, please. Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mariana. For France, the case is a little bit different because we have a law for all the territory. And if I begin as Marta on the context, we had the first law which decriminalized abortion in 1975. It was at this time supposed to be an experimental law for a 5 years period. And after 5 years, the law was perpetuated, and we are still on this first fundamental law of 1975. But since these years, we have seen some enlargements, as for example, in 2001, the delay that was initially at permitted for 10 weeks. This legal delay duration was extended to 12 weeks. And last year, the delay has known another extension too, and women can have abortion, or women or people who seek abortion can have abortion until for 14 weeks. Because in France, it's a little bit particular because we call IVG interruption voluntary interruption, and it is under this main law. But we have also, after the legal duration, the possibility to have therapeutic abortion. And for these therapeutic abortions, there are no delay at all. But women patients can't choose for themselves. I mean, for therapeutic abortion, it's a collegial decision of practitioners. So the question of the choice after 14 weeks is still not in the hands of the woman. And I can also point out recently on the 8th of March 2024, so this year, recently, abortion entered in the Constitution. Maybe you heard about that. Yes, because France is the first country in Europe to have entered abortion in the Constitution. But on my point of view, I don't know if you know, but the initial writing of the text is not the same than the final version. So the text is speaking about freedom of women and not about a fundamental right. But the law is supposed to guarantee the freedom of the woman. So the weakness of this law, to my point of view, is that it's not consecrated as a fundamental right. I don't know if you see what I mean, but this shift in the writing of the text means that it's not so protective as it was in the first version of the text. But on a symbolic way, yes, it was important that abortion entered Constitution.
Thank you so much, Magali. So let me move forward a little bit. Marta and Shoshanna have talked about this relationship between, the federal and the state law and that dynamic, right? And how is it that sometimes, even if it's a federal law, some states don't really obliged to that, and vice versa, right? If some states do have it, even if federally they do not. So if you can tell us a little bit about that interaction in each of your countries, and in the particular case of abortion and how that works. So Magali, can you tell us, let's start now with you, a little bit more about, how is this working in France, specifically now that, abortion has entered the Constitution, even if it's still a little bit, weird, if it's not about, the abortion, it's about women's freedom. But even then, what happens at a state level? Yeah, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you. As I said in introduction, the law is the same for all territories of France. So normally, a woman who is seeking abortion should have the same quality of recourse. But in reality, practices are quite differentiated in terms of level of recourse, in terms of methods, in terms of practitioners available, practitioners authorized to make abortions. So we have across our territories big differences. For example, in France now, 80% of abortions are medical abortion, and it can be offered by hospital, and mainly public hospitals, because private hospital or clinics are almost not anymore providing abortion. Yes, it's like 5% of abortion in private sector. So yes, we have strong discrepancies because some territories you will have more abortion in hospitals. In other territories, you will have more abortion in non-hospital settings, because thanks to the law too, we have the practitioners are very different. It can be specialized practitioners. It can be your doctors in town. It can be midwives since 2016, and midwives now are in some territories, not everywhere, because in some territories, doctors in the hospital don't allow so much midwives to provide abortion, but for some territories in France, midwives are the main practitioners that provide abortion for women. But really recently, they had the right in 2016, so it's 8 years. But yes, this is very important, and we saw that during the COVID epidemic, that non-hospital settings were shift to non-hospital settings was reinforced at the time of COVID, because the public hospital was very busy with the epidemic. Yes, so this is important that practitioners can work together, but it's not really simple across territories. So for women who seek abortion, the question of the choice of the method of the practitioner will not be the same at all. And we see, for example, that young women mainly go to hospital and not in non-hospital settings, maybe for question of confidentiality, but the problem is for young women is the request for abortion is made more later than a more than women who are 30 years or more. So we can see regarding to age, regarding to the territory you live, we will not have the same recourse to abortion.
Thank you so much, Magali. Shoshanna, please take it away.
So in the United States now, it's dramatically different. And again, I just want to reiterate that post-Roe, and that was after 1992, even though there was still a federally protected constitutional right. So there was a floor below which no state could do. But Casey, the 1992 decision, did open the door to increasing regulation, like waiting periods, etc., that burden the right to abortion, and they tended to be in the South, which tends to be poorer. A very large number of low-income women of color lived in states where access was restrictive. And so there's been, even pre-Dobbs, a significant differential between states in the US, but nonetheless, you still had, it could be difficult to access, but you still did have this right. What it means now is with the Dobbs decision, and I should say that we're one of only 3 other countries in the world that have gone in the direction of restricting rather than liberalizing abortion, the others being Nicaragua, El Salvador, and Poland. And so what you have now in the United States is a it's like a complete like patchwork quilt, so that you have 16 states that literally have banned abortion. It's a crime from fertilization, from the moment of conception, because we also have this growing drive to declare the fetus a full human being from the moment of conception. And so you have states that have basically banned abortion. It's 16. With limited exceptions. In some, there's no health exception. In some of these states, there's no exception for rape or incest, for fatal fetal anomalies. So it's essentially a complete ban. Abortion has been shut down. It is a crime. And even if there is an exception, a lot of times it's written in somewhat ambiguous, vague language. You have these hostile climates towards abortion. And in like Texas, a physician, if you sort of quote, get it wrong in terms of whether the abortion fits into the exception, you can end up with a life sentence for performing an abortion. So that even where there are exceptions, there's still this tremendous sort of chilling effect. And I won't go into, but like the Texas Supreme Court there are these horror stories of what 22 pregnant women had endured, and their doctors were to say it was too risky to provide them with abortion care. And so the court was like, well, you know, that's okay, basically. That's our law. And unless you're it's life-threatening, that's it. The door's shut. Then you have maybe around 11 states where the ban kicks in pre-viability. Under Roe, you couldn't ban abortion until viability, roughly 24 weeks. So you still can get an abortion and you can get it until viability, but these states have all sorts of restrictions. So waiting periods, no public or private insurance will pay for an abortion. Restrictions on teens, also restrictions that only physicians can perform abortion. So even though you still have, in theory, they're not bans from conception, nonetheless, the right is very, very burdened. And then, so that's a little more than half of the states. And then in the other half, abortion is legal. And that also, there's sort of a scale. So that in some states, it's legal, but teens have to involve their parents, or it's legal, but there's not public funding. So there's still a degree of restrictions that may apply. And then there's a fair number of states. If you look at a map, you'll see they're kind of on the two coasts, the blue states, the more liberal states. I happen to live in one of the bubbles now. And where not only is abortion fully legal, but you can access public funding for it, and like very little restrictions. But we also have what are called abortion shield laws, because one of the big issues is if someone leaves an abortion ban state and travels, and travel for abortion has gone up exponentially, are providers at risk legally? And so, and a very complicated question. No one quite knows the answer legally, but what a lot of states have done is to say that if a hostile state sues a doctor in a liberal state, New York, Massachusetts, California, Oregon, our state will not cooperate with the out-of-state prosecution. It doesn't mean that the hostile state has to honor it, and the person probably doesn't want, if there's a lawsuit, doesn't want to travel to that state. States can only kind of protect what happens in their borders. Anyway, that's a very complicated question. There haven't been really court decisions on it, but that's sort of other states have really said, we will hold ourselves out as a state that's as safe as we can make it for folks to come to and access, and we will protect to the extent we can providers and quote aiders and abettors of abortion, and including also like the medical boards can't penalize doctors who perform abortions for out-of-state patients, and malpractice insurers can't penalize them by raising rates, etc. So you really have, there's an interactive map for folks who are listening on Guttmacher, Guttmacher. And if you go to their website and you just pull up their interactive map, it's on the landing page, you'll just see they have states ranked in 7 different color categories. So it's, and again, the states that are poorest, that have the sort of least significant safety nets for families, for babies, have high maternal mortality, morbidity, particularly for women of color, are also states that have abortion bans. It's a disaster, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, and deeply, deeply inequitable.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Shoshanna. And I'll make sure to put this resource that you're talking about, this interactive map, once we air this. Yes, absolutely. Thank you. Thank you, Shoshanna.
Sure.
Marta, please go ahead.
Well, Mexico is a federal republic and it has 32 states, and each state has its local constitution and their local penal code. So it's been a problem we have to be changing state for state. And since the reform in Mexico City, there were 16 states that triggered a backlash and tried to amend the local constitution to protect the life from the moment of conception. And even if that didn't change the penal code, it introduced a lot of confusion. So now the resolution of the Supreme Court that has been like opening the panorama in a wonderful way, because even states very conservative, as Aguascalientes, for example, when the Supreme Court made that decision, they changed immediately the law. The law has been changed because there's something in Mexico called amparo. I tried to figure it out, the name in English, but it's a kind of, how you say, constitutional protection that every citizen has, that when they feel there's an injustice to them, they ask for this legal protection. And if it's not attended, it goes to the Supreme Court. So the Supreme Court has made 3 or 4 very important resolutions from amparos in different states that have been a breakthrough in that sense. So now we have 20 states, only with the traditional exception of saving the woman's life or if it's for rape, and 12 states where abortion is a health right and a free access to it. So we are very optimistic about that in this new administration, the other states are going to be changing the law, because the laws are changed by the local deputies, by the local parliament. But the resolutions of the Supreme Court forbid now any kind of criminalization. So in the last thought, there is not possibility now to criminalize a woman for abortion. Maybe it happens because there's a lot of ignorance, and maybe in not every village they know the law, etc. But in the moment that case, gains publicity, things change immediately. I mean, we are in a very good moment now in Mexico. And the issue of abortion has changed radically in the last years for this Supreme Court resolution. That's what we are far from what happened in France, and I'm really so happy about having it symbolically inside the constitutions. And when we see the change in the politics in Europe and the meeting of the G7, that they didn't want to put the issue of abortion in the discussion, well, one of the things that we have learned with what happened in the States with dogs is that laws can change depending on the political context. And now in Mexico, we have a very progressive context. We have a new president that's going to take office in October, and she's pro-choice. So I think things are going to be, we are going to have those 20 states very fast changing their laws, their internal laws. And the thing that Mexico wants to do, since Olga Sanchez Cordero was the first Ministry of Interior in Mexico, and she wanted to make all the penal codes the same in Mexico, not one penal code for each state. You have states where you kill a person and then you receive 5 years. But in another state, you kill a person and you have 20 years. And there's an automobile crash and you have 3 months. And in another state, it's 4 years. You know, it's crazy. I mean, justice has to have like the same norms. So now with the new administration, one of the proposals of the judicial system is to make the same law, penal law, for everything. And only the abortion that it's done against the wishes of the person involved, it's going to be a crime, but not the other kinds of abortions.
Thank you so much, Marta. So we're running a little bit out of time, so I'm going to try to speed things up. So I just wanted to talk a little bit, if we can go over this, because I'm really interested, not just in the sort of legal part as we've been talking about, but also sort of the social acceptance of abortion in each of your countries, right? Because sometimes, I mean, people have said in Mexico, right, if you put abortion up for debate, it wouldn't pass, right? I mean, people have said this. So I'm just interested in leaving sort of the legal debate to the side for a second. What is the social acceptance of abortion in each of your countries? So Magali, let's start with you again, if it's okay.
Yeah, thank you. In France, I would say it's common to think that abortion is a right. So there is a global social acceptance. But it remains stigmatized, especially for younger women, for example, who are judged by practitioners and yes, and although rates of abortion among young women is relatively low, so it's very strange, this stigmatization, culpabilization of young women who seek for abortion. So I would say that the issue is still very taboo. And abortion is still seen as a kind of drama in the life of a woman, even though most people who seek for abortion is a strong decision in their life, and is not especially a drama, but it's still presented as a drama. And at another level, at the political level, deputies and senators, especially who are from the center right or extreme right parties, regularly try to slow down requests for enlargements of the law made by the left-wing parties. and they provoke very long debates when it comes to abortion thema. So I would say that there is a global acceptance, but it's still stigmatized, and political deputies or senators can make the theme of abortion still as a strong debate in France. So, and we saw it for the debate of the constitution, when abortion entered the constitution. I said the text was modified, especially because of the right wing of political deputies and senators, because they didn't want to talk about a fundamental right, but they accept only the idea of liberty of women to have abortion. But as in the constitution, the text said the law decides about the condition of abortion. And you know that we will have legislative elections next Sunday, and that's the extreme right parties is feel to win. So yes, we still are not very there is still danger, as you said, and we saw that in US, we saw that Poland, we saw that in Italy too, where practitioners, it's very difficult to find practitioners. So yes, yes, these elections will take place soon is a big concern for France now.
Thank you so much, Magali. Marta, please.
Well, in Mexico, as in many countries of Latin America, the green tide, La Marea Verde, is this mobilization of very young girls and a lot of other citizens that have been changing the narrative about abortion, as a right. It has been impressive. What happened in Argentina in 2020, where the Pope, they got abortion free for 14 weeks. Now, with a new president, it looks like things are going to change. It's like Magali says, depends on the political balance in the country. But the green grass movement, is impressive in Mexico. It's been this small groups of feminist girls, Marea Verde, that have pushed, the political debate inside the legislatures. And it looks like it's going to go forward. I mean, we are very vocal about this. Even, important personage like Undersecretary of the Minister of Interior, Alejandro Encinas, when he went to the Nairobi summit about the 20 years after Cairo, he had the green handkerchief in his wrist because he was sending a signal that he was pro-choice. Now, using the green, I didn't put my green handkerchief today, but using the green handkerchief sends a signal about the position on abortion. And you see every time more and more public officials and figures of cultural and artistic media using the green handkerchief. So we're very positive that things are moving, not only in Mexico, but in Latin America. And for us, France is an example, really, Magali. Feel happy, even if it's not, I understand what you said about the freedom instead of right, but it's wonderful. You have it in the Constitution.
Thank you so much, Marta. Shoshanna, please.
So both of your countries are now real role models for us here in the US. And I think you know, it's, I think a lot of people took Roe versus Wade for granted, even though those of us who've been involved in the movement saw the erosion drip by drip, and then with the election of Trump and the getting to appoint 3 new Supreme Court justices. And so the right is deeply galvanized in our country, and the anti-abortion movement has been sort of single issue for a long, long time. And they've had a lot of power, and our country is, you know, we have an election also coming up, and it's there's a real movement to try to now enact a federal abortion ban. And there's something called Project 2025, which is this deeply conservative, I don't know, 900-page document laying out this plan. And not just about abortion, but about all sorts of stuff. But abortion and the idea of a national ban has a lot of support, and it's deeply religious along religious lines in this country. It does not mean exclusively. Lots and lots of folks are arguing for dignity, control over one's body as a religious right, not right as in conservative, but as a right into one's body based on religious principles. But mostly it's very much a very powerful, mostly white evangelical Protestant movement to take back the right to abortion, to establish legally, and some conservative states now have it in their state statutes or state constitutions, that a fetus is a full human being. There's also, I think, inspired by the Green Wave, and the using now more in this country, looking at what's happened a lot, looking to our neighbors in the South in particular. And people have, I mean, there's always been a strong support, strong feminist movement, but I think now, looking to Los Libres in Mexico in terms of access to abortion pills, and looking to our southern border and collaborating with feminists in other countries. And, you know, I think it's been a real powerful wake-up call. And so there's also a very deep ideological, conservative, progressive, feminist split. And just the one thing I want to say, and you had mentioned, Mariana, in the intro, that this idea now of abortion regret has really become part of the language of the anti-abortion movement, which is that women are the second victims, and you're sort of with obliterating your female body, your female destiny, that you're here for procreative purposes. And so that's also, it's not just about fetal life now in terms of framing and a platform for the anti-abortion movement.
Yeah, that was used in Argentina also. We want to save both lives, the women and the fetus.
Exactly. The people who sort of put that forward called it a pro-woman, pro-life platform, and that they were speaking for the authentic rights of women, and this idea of abortion trauma as a powerful trope.
And now that you mentioned Las Libres, Mariana and Magali, maybe you don't know, this is a group in Guanajuato, a feminist group that sends medical abortion by DHL or messenger service to the United States, so they can have access of the wonderful pill that also was in France. It was discovered in the 80s, no? So now Mexican groups are helping our colleagues in the States to get medical abortions. It's incredible. It was, the way around some years ago, it was Mexicans going to the States to have abortions, and now it's other way.
The border crossings have shifted directions for this.
Wow. So this works only Mexico, US? Is that the relation?
Now, yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Now, the medical abortion, we can get it very easily here in Mexico. It's legal. That's one of the things that's good about Mexico. It's legal. So they sent packages of medical abortion to feminists in the States.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I was just like curious because something that Shoshanna, you were saying, you know, this sort of trauma kind of relates to what Magali was saying about the drama, right? It's very curious that even transnationally, this is still sort of the trope that is being used on abortion, right? It's a trauma, it's a drama, you know, it's something that you need to get over. So it's really interesting. I just wanted to sort of point that out.
Can I jump in with a response to that also? I mean, also, I'm going off script here, but you know, abortion's never been just about saving babies. It's also a deeply patriarchal understanding of gender roles. And in the US right now, we're also seeing a lot of surveillance and digitally, and attempts to sue women who leave a state and going after them for crossing state lines. And I think that this idea of drama or trauma is very much has to do with gender roles, gender norms, and a reinstatement of real, or not that it ever left, but very deeply gendered understandings of sexuality, of roles, of marriage. And so I just sort of wanted to get that in as well as part of this.
And this is also part of this discussion on gender ideology, you know, that the far right is doing in Europe, in Latin America, in the States, and in Mexico. So it's part of the same package, you know, the same narrative of the far right, ultra conservatives. They want to restore the natural order and the Christian values and so on and so forth.
Yeah, Shoshanna, do you want to? Yeah.
Oh, I was just going to say, I don't know if it's a phrase, and I wouldn't know how to say it in either French or Spanish, but this idea now of the trad wife, it's a big trope here, and the traditional wife, but trad wife for short, and but that's very much kind of this being put out by the right, and the anti-abortion movement is tied very deeply into that very normative understanding of sexuality and gender ideology and roles.
Right, right. Well, I know we can talk about this for hours and hours, but I just want to sort of close this with one last question. So I actually want to sort of put two things together as a closing sort of argument, if you may. So one is sort of, you know, reflecting on how things are in your countries and listening to what is going on in other countries, and maybe not just in Mexico, the US, or France, but maybe you know about things that are happening in other places as well. Sort of what is it that we need to do to keep advancing reproductive rights in each of our countries, right? I know the US, it's quite a challenge right now, but even if it's a challenge, right, what sort of lessons can be learned from this conversation and, you know, your own research to keep advancing in these issues? So Magali, if you want to take it away as the closing argument, please.
Yes, it's a big question, so I will try to be short. I would say because I didn't speak about that, but Marta and Shoshanna, you have spoken about some categories of people. So I would say to be inclusive for all categories of people, migrants, homosexual, trans people who have not secure access to reproductive rights, and yes, to providers that can stigmatize those population, and also disabled people, because disabled women are often in institution, and in institution when a woman enter an institution, a disabled woman, she will be automatically see a doctor and give contraception. And often she even doesn't know it, that she takes pill. And yes, so yes, there is big question among vulnerable categories of people. I wanted to point out. For France, I would say to develop free contraception. We have that for young people under 25 years old, but I think it could be more extended to other people too, who are vulnerable too, as I said, and promote temporary or permanent sterilization, because in France, we have very few people who seek for sterilizations. So and contraceptive issue on sterilization was legalized in 2001 in France. So sterilization is not in our mental practice, you know. So, and very few men accept even temporary sterilization. And I would say also a better management of women's issues, reproductive, sexual and reproductive issues. And as I said already, the COVID was typically a scene where we saw gender roles. And political even didn't thought about women who have to give birth, women who have to have their abortion still in COVID period, and it was not seen as a primary care, but it is. A woman who have to give birth has to give birth, and a woman who seek for abortion seeks for abortion, and these are cares that cannot be delayed. So yes, feminists ask for a better taking into account of these problematics. But at the beginning of the crisis, yes, these kinds of care, woman care, were not even seen by, even think about by political. And maybe a last thing, I said that in France, for abortion, it's 80% of medical abortion. And this is an issue too, because in some territories last year or 2 years ago, yes, after what happened in USA, we had some restrictions in to provide abortion pills. Because there is a laboratory in Italy who provide with misoprostol, and our stocks in France were not provided enough. Because each year abortion rate is increasing recently in France, and each year medical abortion is more and more important. So the question of our autonomy in producing pill is a big issue too, because yes, if the law is protective, if a conservative government is coming soon, maybe they can decide to give less money to associations, to planning, to the center of planification. And this issue of autonomy of pill is, from my point of view, a big issue too.
Thank you so much, Magali. Shoshanna, please.
So I think the November election is crucial in the United States. I think in a very deep way. But one of the things also is not just presidential, but having a Democratic majority both in the House of Representatives and the Senate, because one of the things is not to say that states won't rebel, but to pass a federal statute that requires access. It won't be the same as constitutionalization. And I know states like various of the conservative states are going to argue they don't have to obey it, but at least to make that kind of statutory protection, I think is really, really important. I also think this reframing in terms of reproductive justice, not just choice, is a very important one that, you know, really began by Sister Song, a group of Black women, to talk about the choice isn't just to have an abortion, but it's the choice to have an abortion, to have children, and to be able to have them and raise them in safe environments, and to be able to link it more broadly to the idea of justice for individual people, for communities. I think that's a really critical reframing away from just sort of this idea of personal choice and autonomy, which is really was the basis of Roe. So I think really thinking about it in broader terms of individual and social justice are really critical. And I'm scared for our future, I have to say, but the organization is really, really powerful, and the help and support from Mexico, and also this idea, I don't know how to say in Spanish, but of accompaniment, that of, you know, like the importance of accompanying and supporting and destigmatizing, those are powerful ideas. So I think I'll leave it at that. Thank you
so much. No, thank you, Shoshana. Marta, please.
Well, I think it needs two things. We have to change the narrative about abortion, first of all. And in Mexico, what it worked was we frame it as a social justice issue. I mean, rich women have the possibility of having abortions secretly with their own doctors and clinics or whatever. And the problem was the ones who didn't have that money, no? So it was a social justice issue, because illegality, what it implies is all the risk about terminating pregnancies, you know, with people who are not professionals or whatever. So even if we have still a long way for the provision of services in those states that it's already legal, services are not really, you know, working at full. So we have to change the narrative to really make services available to in places that it's legal, and to change the political balance. And I think the issue about misoprostol is very important. Mexico buys from China misoprostol, and medical abortion is very easy and changes, you know, the idea of these tragic abortions. So we have to look forward to how our country's going to deal with that, no? With this administration of something so simple, but at the same time, it can really change. So changing the cultural narrative implies also having secularism, no? The lay instead of religious frames of discussion, of public discussions. And making the provision as a health right that any woman or person with a capacity to get impregnated, no, like trans men, for example, can really go to a public hospital and have that service free and without risk. I think that's really about justice, as Shoshanna said. I mean, really, that's the fundamental issue.
Thank you so much, Marta. Well, this is all that we have time for today. I really want to thank Magali, Shoshanna, Marta. Thank you so much for joining us. I really hope that we can continue this conversation in another chapter. But for now, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so
Mariana.
much.
Yeah.
Thank you.